Hey everyone, welcome back to Political X. For more knowledge and updates on UK, European and US politics, make sure you subscribe to this channel. What is the chance of Boris Johnson being re-elected? I've gathered 13 things that I think are key indicators to show that Boris Johnson will not win the next election, and I can say that with several years to go, because I do not believe anything's going to change. And frankly, wait until you see the scandal section at the end. I haven't even really completed it. It's too much and it's for another video. But it'll give you enough of an overview to show just how many scandals have taken place in such a short period of time. It's simply shocking. So this is a simple one. If you're the incumbent, i.e. you're the Prime Minister, before you go into the election, that's normally 1 point to yourself. This is an interesting one. Do we have a third party taking votes away from anyone else? I don't think so. I mean, there's some evidence to show that the Greens have grown, especially in the local elections. They gained the most seats. The Liberal Democrats won a shock by-election from the Conservatives in the south of England, in the Blue Wall, and they also had gains in the local council elections. But I don't think either of them are big enough to really take a huge chunk out of the Conservative Party. Liberals might take a small chunk, and Greens would probably take a chunk out the Labour Party. So even with the gains for the Liberal Democrats, I don't think it's going to take a big enough chunk out the Conservatives, so that's 1 point to Boris. Uncharismatic challenge. Is a nice-ish guy, but there's no charisma, and I'm going to be really careful on what I say here. Uncharismatic challenge, to be charismatic, you've got to really stand out from the crowd. I just don't see Keir Starmer being considered charismatic. He's not like, well, let's have a look. Essentially, he's not a Barack Obama. He's not Mr. Confident, Mr. Charisma, got everything together, able to deal with any situation, to have a laugh. It's not part of his.
You look so powerful. High five. That's oh, you're so strong. You knocked me over.
And frankly, Boris is just worse. I mean, this was just awful to watch. It was cringeworthy enough to be up there with watching an episode of The Office.
Are you the guys who are being inundated with all the emails from everywhere in the world saying please help my son, mother, get out of Afghanistan? Yeah, I've had a few.
A lot of distressed people saying that their families being left behind and obviously wanting to bring them back. Yeah.
Do we know whether the crowd has thinned out yet because of the terrorist attack? I thought it was extraordinary that they all stayed.
Amazing, yeah.
I think there are still a few people who are trying to get in, but a lot of them have dispersed or gone back home because of our advice to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for what you're doing.
I think it's safe to say that Boris just doesn't have that level of charisma, especially after the last couple of years. It is definitely tanked out to zero. So that's a point to Keir Starmer. It's amazing how many pictures can be so useful for different messages. I don't think there's going to be a contest within his own party. If it was going to happen, it probably would have started to come to the forefront now. So that's 1 point to Boris. So local election gains were quite interesting. It's mixed. Labour won on single authority mayors. Then Labour also won on combined authority mayors. But overall, the Conservatives got more councillors by 15%. Obviously, there were exceptions, with the Libs and the Greens making huge inroads, especially the Greens. So this was really interesting. The foreign military failure point, he has definitely lost. That is 1 for Keir Starmer and nothing for Boris. This is also interesting because one of our largest recruitment areas happens to be the Red Wall. And we can see from any family that was involved in the Afghan war, they're pretty frustrated with the government and what is taking place in Afghanistan. So that's 1 for Starmer and nothing for Boris. There's been no major policy change. Everything is sort of just keeping the course, getting Brexit done, trying to keep the economy stable, get some free trade agreements. There's not been anything that's like a major turning point or change for Boris's premiership. Foreign military success. This normally gets you a bit of a rousing crowd supporting you and wanting another term like Thatcher had with the Falklands. But Boris hasn't had that. So that's another point to Starmer and nothing for Boris. The next thing on our list is strong short-term economy. The answer is no. He's been heavily affected by COVID, and there's also issues around Brexit. We've got other issues for the long-term economy as well. We have issues with foreign investment not coming into the UK as much as it had been. We've got issues with household debt, which is ever increasing, although there was a period just after and during COVID of some debt being paid off. We can see that the debt levels are still increasing. Interestingly, financial services continue to grow. We had a bit of a spurt with general goods trade, but overall it's going down still. One of the things that did shock me the most was UK exports in January dropping so much compared to the previous 6 months, which has included fishing, food, and what I found most shocking was 50% in oil. We're still at the beginning of this in many ways because the UK is not having its imports checked from the EU at present. That is to come in this October. That is going to cause even more problems for the UK and its economy. The next is social unrest, and there has been a ton of social unrest within the UK. This is Bristol, Northern Ireland, Black Lives Matter in London. And this is only 3. There have been a lot more that have been taking place across the UK. This is definitely a point for Keir Starmer and nothing for Boris. If you're enjoying my video and like to say thanks, please feel free to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description below. Now the final thing here is scandals, and my word, there are so many. So obviously here we've got Windrush,
We'll look at what
Ratcliffe, and Boris saying the wrong thing about what she did as a job, which got her in trouble.
Teaching people journalism, as I understand it, or at the very limit. She was, and I hope that
The 2020 floods, where Boris didn't turn up for 5 days and upset the community.
If the community can come together in such a short time to respond to the needs, to those people that have been devastated, upset, emotionally, lost their livelihoods, their possessions, and it took you over 5 days. You should have been there Saturday morning having a meeting, making sure that these people get the help and the support, and I'm sorry, your announcements yesterday was a pittance.
We have the case of Harry Dunn, where the Foreign Secretary met up with the Americans the day before Ansakoulis was released. And it appears that they had a good old jolly, but no one brought up Harry Dunn throughout that entire meeting. Here's Harry's mother.
Sick doesn't even come close. Celebrating life. You know, the drinks were flowing, but it was just more evidence for me over the last few days that Harry was the most unimportant thing to them ever.
So Harry Dunn died in a car crash with him on a motorbike driven by a lady by the name of Ansakoulis. Dominic Raab knew about this for 3 days within 3 days after the event, but didn't bother to bring it up when meeting with the US ambassador. Ansakoulis was then released from the UK, and you just go, right, so if you're a foreign national, and it seems to be a reoccurring thing at the moment, if you're a foreign national, you can come over to the UK, kill someone, and leave without being charged. And the reason I can be so flippant about this is because of obviously all the whackings that this man has instigated in the United Kingdom. According to BuzzFeed, they estimate about 15 people have been whacked by the Russian government because they speak out against the Russian government. However, that isn't even the scandal. The actual scandal is the fact that the UK elections have been interfered with in Scotland, which is a fact, and that no one has bothered to check and see any other election after the Scottish independence referendum, I should say. No one has bothered to check or investigate to see if any other interference has taken place. However, that's not the end of it. We know more. We know that MPs have been taking money from Putin ex-employees or ex-Putin best friends or Putin's ex-wives, and they've been funding the Tory party. And that's why they ignore the meddling. That's why we're not getting much in terms of an investigation into what Russia has been doing in the UK. The Met Police released a statement a few years back saying that they were aware that £750 million have been laundered through London with Russian money. No investigation. Honestly, this list just goes on. So Boris also illegally blocked Parliament from operating for several weeks, and it took the Supreme Court to come in to make a decision that it was illegal.
No justification for taking action with such an extreme effect has been put before the court, because it had the effect of frustrating or preventing the ability of Parliament.
This is Grenfell Tower. Have a listen. I mean, not only is there the issue of the cladding that should have been removed from the building, and cladding is essentially plastic. They wrap it in plastic, which is highly flammable. But then Jacob Rees-Mogg comes out and tries to suggest that the people who were inside should have completely ignored the fire service advice and used their common sense to leave. Have a listen.
Of the cladding, leading to the fire racing up the building, and then was compounded by the stay put policy. And it seems to me that that is the tragedy of it, that the more one's read over the weekend about the report and about the chances of people surviving, if you just ignore what you're told and leave, you are so much safer. And I think if either of us were in a fire, whatever the fire brigade said, we would leave the burning building. It just seems the common sense thing to do, and it is such a tragedy that that didn't happen. But
Then we go into pandemic era. So we've got no PPE for our nurses, and that's because the government haven't stockpiled enough, and the stocks that they have are out of date. I'm aware of community nurses having to go into homes without the correct PPE or no PPE, and they were also told if they made anything of their own and used that, it would mean that they would get fired because the insurance wouldn't cover it. We have the issue of care homes where people were taken into hospital. They may or may not have had COVID. They didn't know because they didn't check, and then they were sent back into care homes, which caused a huge problem with the care home communities and killed thousands of people who did not need to die of COVID. It's interesting when Boris talks about spaffing money against the wall, because this definitely did it. Cost somewhere in the region of about 80 billion. I think the Germans managed to get their system for 1 billion. Our 80 billion system still isn't really working properly. It's still got bugs, and was just a total waste of taxpayers' money, because it didn't even go with the policies that the government were pushing forward, which were over herd immunity.
People, the vast majority of people, get a mild illness to build up some degree of herd immunity as well, so that more people are immune to this disease and we reduce the transmission. At the same time, we protect those who are most vulnerable from it. Those are the key things we need to do.
And it doesn't even stop with herd immunity being pushed upon the public. I'll add this. More people have died in 1 year under this government than the Nazis managed in 5 years of bombing us. That's how many people have died. Then we come on to Dominic Cummings, who himself caused a scandal and was totally protected by the Prime Minister. Not only did he drive all the way north with COVID and his wife had COVID, but he then justified it by suggesting he didn't do anything wrong, even though there were strict instructions not to leave your house if you had COVID. And his sister-in-law lived in London, and he's a member of government. He must have been able to contact someone within government to potentially come and help him out if need be. The thing that gets me the most when you hear something like this from him, and from people who try and defend his actions, they go, oh, it was extreme circumstance, he had no one to rely on. What about all the single mums? Which totals in the hundreds of thousands. What if they all did that? What if Dominic Cummings had broken down or had to go into a garage and get food? He is spreading it throughout the country. It is not acceptable what he did. And anyone who thinks otherwise is delusional.
No, I don't regret what I did. As I said, I think reasonable people may well disagree about how I thought about what to do in these circumstances, but I think that what I did was actually reasonable in these circumstances.
We have PPE contracts being given out to pub landlords to develop masks. Yet community nurses who have got medical training aren't allowed to build their own masks for when they go into people's houses. This is totally insane. It's also been shown to be completely illegal. Both Hancock and Gove have been reprimanded for it. We also have the Jennifer Curie affair. Now, this obviously took place while Boris was mayor. However, a lot of the stuff that came out afterwards didn't. It came out whilst he was Prime Minister, when he was trying to deny that he was having an affair at all and just wouldn't comment on it. But it actually seems that he's broken ministerial code, and he's also broken regulations within the London local authority. I promise there is an end to this. It is just insane what they've been doing. Matt Hancock, who was in charge of trying to save our healthcare system and our lives from COVID, also was telling everyone not to meet up with anyone that they didn't know. So that meant you couldn't be having an affair, and they even passed legislation to stop you having an affair or having sex with anyone who wasn't you were in a relationship with. Whilst all the time he was having an affair and probably having sex with this woman inside 10 Downing Street. Fantastic. Now, whilst this was all taking place inside the government, there was another row erupting which involved bullying, and ironically, this man here, Gavin Williamson, had just done a video saying that bullying is bad in schools.
Place for every child to thrive. Bullying is never acceptable. Every school must have anti-bullying policies in place so that no pupil fears coming to school or working online.
And ironically, the day before that video came out, Priti Patel was getting in a lot of trouble for bullying her members of staff, for swearing at them, and for making them extremely upset. She claims that she had a lack of support, which is why she had to scream and swear and shout at them. We also have the scandal involving the war in Yemen. An expert on the war had observed bombs being supplied by Britain, are being dropped by planes built by Britain, flown by pilots trained by Britain, and kept in the sky with British maintenance. The war and the humanitarian crisis would not be happening as it is without British support. This is the final scandal. Boris appears to be stopping an investigation into Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein and Prince Andrew. And there seems to be a real thing of foreign nationals coming over and killing or hurting or sexually assaulting our citizens and being able to get away with it. Harry Dunn, killed by an American, the American leaves and nothing's done about it. Vladimir Putin seems to be able to send over people from Russia on a regular basis to kill British nationals and British citizens. And the Met police have investigated twice Epstein coming over to the UK and sexually assaulting little girls, along with Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know what is going on and why it seems to be a case that there's a repeating theme of, if you're a foreign national, you can come over to Britain and kill people or sexually assault them and then just leave and nothing will happen to you. It is absolutely bizarre. One of the worst things to come out of it, though, was Boris's reaction to this. Not only does he suggest that the British monarchy is beyond reproach, so it's perfect as it is, he also considers the money of 60 million investigating into child sexual exploitation to be a waste of money.
I think an awful lot of money, an awful lot of police time now goes into these historic offences and all this malarkey, and 60 million pounds I saw was being spaffed up the wall on some investigation into historic child abuse and all this kind of thing. I mean, what on earth is that going to do to protect the public now?
The institution of the monarchy is beyond reproach.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Keir Starmer is on course to win. Now, obviously things can change. I don't really see how they could or will, but there is a possibility that something's going to happen that will change the course of this. If that happens, I will definitely update this, but at the moment, if I was a betting man, I'd actually say Keir Starmer. The one thing that I find quite odd at the moment is whether or not approval ratings are going to go up, or if they actually meant anything. Boris has done so much to hack people off over the last 2 years. It's almost unbelievable. He is his own worst enemy. So let me know your thoughts. Have I been unfair anywhere? Am I unfair to the third parties? Should that have gone in a different direction? Was I fair about the local elections? I think there's a lot to be debated here, but I've sort of sided one way or the other, and love to see your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy my work, please consider buying me a coffee. Link is in the description. Or, if you prefer, sponsor me on Patreon. Thank you so much. Political observations this week. If you'd like to support me, please share the video with others and post about it on social media. If you're keen for more, subscribe, comment, like, and hit that notification button. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on Political X.